Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something complex, something fascinating. We want to unpack the core architecture, the underlying structure of a profound, lasting personal change.
Hmm.
We're talking about those deep spiritual and psychological principles, the ones that really form the foundation of successful recovery programs.
Right.
For anyone looking at genuine transformation, I think the question always boils down to the same thing. How do you actually move from that point of absolute crisis, maybe hopelessness, to a life that feels anchored, serene, purposeful, with self-worth?
And that transformation, it's nothing less than a complete spiritual and intellectual reconstruction. It
Yeah.
really is.
Reconstruction.
Our source material, and this comes from decades of recovery literature, backed up by a lot of modern psychological understanding too, it details this really intense, action-oriented process. We're looking beyond just, stopping a behavior.
Beyond abstinence.
Exactly. We're focusing on the mechanics that drive it. Acceptance, humility seen as a realistic tool, not weakness, and the absolute necessity of ongoing, rigorous self-examination.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning then. That essential shift in perspective. There's a writer, Chuck C., who called this needing a new pair of glasses.
That's a great metaphor.
It suggests the problem initially isn't just what someone does, it's how they see, right? It's fundamentally perceptual.
Precisely. That's the core insight. The mind that's caught, stuck in addiction, is effectively looking through a distorted lens. There's this trap.
A trap.
Yeah, a mindset characterized by this, heartbreaking delusion, this insistent yearning to somehow control things or get back to the old pleasures, as Chuck C. put it.
Even when those pleasures are long gone.
Especially then. He noted that even when misery had totally replaced any pleasure, the individual would just keep insisting on trying to recreate that past. They're looking backward through those distorted glasses.
Wow. So the first pivotal action has to be step one, acceptance. Admitting powerlessness over the substance, the behavior, whatever it is, and admitting life has become unmanageable. But, for someone who's maybe used to success or relies on their own willpower, that word acceptance, it can sound like giving up completely, like defeat.
It absolutely can, and that's a huge hurdle.
So how do the sources redefine it? How does it become empowering?
Well, the program, the literature, it explicitly reframes acceptance. It's not defeat. It's presented as the only empowering path forward. It's the moment the light actually switches on.
Okay.
You're finally acknowledging the reality of the situation. You're confronting the painful, uncomfortable truth. And crucially, recognizing those lifelong patterns of denial, of self-deception that had just kept the whole cycle spinning.
So until you see the problem clearly,
You can't see a way out. Until you acknowledge the full extent of its power over you, you cannot possibly find a path to freedom. Acceptance is just. It's an honest evaluation of things as they really are. No more filters.
it's powerful then to ground this initial sort of spiritual or philosophical requirement in the hard biological reality, too. We've got sources that talk about the neurobiology, right? How addiction actually changes the brain.
Yes, and that integration is vital, especially for understanding powerlessness today. It's not just a concept. It has a physical basis.
So what's happening chemically?
Well, think about alcohol or many sedatives. They profoundly slow down brain function. They suppress an excitatory neurotransmitter called glutamate, and they significantly boost an inhibitory one, GABA.
Okay, suppress the go signal, boost the stop signal.
You got it. And this chemical soup leads directly to sedation, poor coordination, obviously, but critically, a greatly diminished capacity to reason, to exercise foresight, to think things through.
So the very type of rational thought you'd need to accept step one,
Yeah.
it's chemically handicapped.
It is. And then the cycle repeats. The brain adapts. And this is where it gets even trickier. The craving becomes even more powerful than any initial enjoyment ever was.
How does that work?
Repeated use creates these profound neuroadaptations. Specifically, the brain's reward pathway, the mesolimbic dopamine system, it becomes hypersensitive.
Hypersensitive.
Yeah. And what's crucial to grasp here is that this sensitization actually separates the craving, the compulsion, the wanting from the actual liking, the pleasure you get.
So you want it even if you don't like it anymore.
Exactly. The body, the brain, is trained to pursue the substance almost above all else. This results in compulsive seeking that just keeps going, even when the pleasure is gone, even when it leads to absolute devastation, losing your job, your home, family, reputation. Everything.
The brain is literally hardwired in that state to push towards self-destruction. That really gives a concrete biological meaning to
It
powerlessness.
really does. It creates a verifiable basis for it.
And this state, this complete physical and mental entrapment, it makes the very next step, step two, feel, well, completely paradoxical, almost miraculous even.
It is the ultimate paradox, isn't it? You've just accepted absolute helplessness, total powerlessness, and now you're asked to make this huge spiritual leap. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
Yeah. That's where the resistance must really kick in, especially for people who see themselves as, highly rational, maybe secular. They've just been broken down, convinced they're alcoholic or addicted, and then bam, rely on God. The literature itself points this out. Some won't believe, others feel they can't believe.
Yeah, and even those who do believe often lack the faith that some miracle is going to happen for them. They feel they're the exception.
So how did the program survive that hurdle? How do you address that fundamental resistance?
It had to be addressed directly or it wouldn't have worked. The core solution, the genius of it, really, lies in the radical inclusivity of one specific phrase. God as we understood him.
Ah, that qualifier, as we understood him.
That's the key allowance. That's the wiggle room. The goal isn't to force a specific theology onto anyone. It's to find any source of strength that is greater than your own self.
Because the self has failed.
Because the self, the prideful ego, your own willpower, it's proven itself totally incapable of controlling the problem. That's the reality accepted in step one.
But if the concept is that flexible, is there a risk? Does it dilute the power? Does it just become, I don't know, positive thinking with a vague spiritual label?
That's a really excellent and necessary question, and the sources are clear on this. The power has to be perceived as greater than the self.
Okay.
And it has to be something believed capable of restoring sanity. That's why very often, especially early on, the power is represented by the fellowship itself.
The group.
The collective strength, the shared wisdom, the experience of the group. There's an account in the literature of a struggling patient, very resistant, who initially could only accept 4 friends. Just 4 people, as representing his higher power.
Just 4 friends.
Yeah, and that was enough to start. The point isn't the specific label or theology. It's the recognition that my willpower failed, but this God idea, this reliance on something external, something benevolent, something bigger than me, it works. It provides an anchor point outside of the compromised mind.
And step 3 then formalizes that acceptance. It turns it into action. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. This is the moment of absolute surrender.
The big leap.
Which, as we said, can feel inherently humiliating for the ego.
It's profoundly difficult because it involves willingly letting go of that core belief that you are the sole controller, the only leader of your own life, that you should be able to fix this yourself.
Right.
The sources use a really beautiful analogy here. They compare the relationship to dancing with a partner.
Okay.
If 2 people on the dance floor both insist on leading, what happens?
Chaos, clashing, tripping.
Exactly. Friction, confusion, bucking, stepping on toes.
Yeah.
But when the one who is supposed to be following just relaxes, stops fighting it, and lets the partner steer,
Then they flow.
then the couple flows easily across the floor. That effortless flow, that sense of being guided, that's the psychological and spiritual reward of surrender. Letting go of the need to control everything.
So this flow depends on humility. But humility is another tricky word, often misunderstood as, putting yourself down.
Right.
Weakness.
Self-flagellation.
Yeah. So how does the literature ensure that this rigorous self-examination, the surrender, leads to actual self-worth and not just crippling shame?
That's critical. Humility has to be defined correctly. It is absolutely not humiliation. It's presented as a true, realistic evaluation of conditions just as they are.
Seeing clearly again.
Seeing yourself
Right.
without the distortions of pride or the opposite self-pity. When you achieve that perspective, realizing you're neither uniquely special in your suffering nor are you entirely worthless, then gratitude becomes possible. Real gratitude. And humility and gratitude, they're presented as the basic stabilizing ingredients. They're necessary to build this new spiritual foundation, replacing the chaos and the failures of the ego.
The diversity baked into God as we understood him also seems really key here for expanding that foundation beyond maybe rigid traditional ideas.
Absolutely. The varieties of spirituality you find reflected in the literature and in the rooms today are incredibly expansive. For many people, particularly women sometimes, the concept of a higher power resonates more deeply when it's viewed maybe as a feminine force.
Like what?
Oh, perhaps the flow of life energy, or a sort of goddess consciousness, or simply a life-affirming image of the divine that prioritizes nurture, growth, connection, rather than just judgment or power.
Right.
Others look for a more inclusive spirituality, one that embodies a balance, the necessary balance of both masculine and feminine qualities. It's very open.
But the core function is the same, whatever the understanding.
Exactly. The connection to this power, however you conceive it, it expands your experience of self. It takes you beyond your previous limitations. It actually increases self-worth. Not by puffing up the ego, but by connecting the individual to something larger, a greater stream of life, if you will. And this empowering connection, it replaces the failure of the old prideful ego with a steady, reliable source of strength. That's what enables the person to finally move towards healthy action.
Okay, so moving past that foundational spiritual work, we pivot towards the practical stuff, the really active work. The later steps seem to demand intense vulnerability, rigorous action, basically clearing the wreckage of the past.
The action steps?
Let's look at step 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. That sounds like an enormous psychological hurdle, just being ready.
It really is the hinge step. Think about it. The first 5 steps, acceptance, hope, surrender, inventory, admission, they prepare the person to know their character defects. They've seen them, listed them, admitted them.
Right.
Step 6 asks them to shift from just knowing to being ready for them to be removed. It demands this deep look inward. Are you truly willing to approach life in a fundamentally different way now? Are you willing to trust that the spiritual connection you've hopefully started to cultivate will actually work with you to remove these defects? This requires huge vulnerability.
Why vulnerability specifically?
Because it means being willing to give up familiar, even if they were painful, emotional survival mechanisms.
Yeah.
Things like resentment, dishonesty, fear, patterns you might have relied on unconsciously for decades. Letting those go feels risky.
So the spiritual work of steps 1, 2, and 3 makes the vulnerability needed for 6, 7, 8, 9 psychologically possible.
It lays the groundwork. It provides the trust needed to take the risk. And this action-oriented mindset, it continues right into the maintenance work, especially step 10.
Which is?
Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it.
Ah, the daily practice.
Exactly. It's often called putting the day to bed. It's the mechanism that keeps that spiritual foundation solid, day in, day out. It involves a nightly self-reflection. But crucially, it's meant to be a gentle, non-condemnatory review of the day's events.
Gentle, not beating yourself up.
Not at all. The sources suggest this kind of introspective activity often comes maybe more naturally to women, who perhaps tend to treat everyday interactions more like mirrors, reflecting deeper aspects of themselves. But the practice is for everyone.
And the goal is just awareness, not self-punishment.
Precisely. The goal is gentle observation. Self-acceptance, actually. It's about releasing the corrosive burden of guilt, confusion, shame, before it settles in overnight and festers.
Okay.
The objective is to spot the exact moment, if possible, when serenity was lost during the day. When did that beast nature, selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear, when did it start to take over? Or simply, when did you move from conscious connection with your principles or your higher power into unconscious disconnection?
And by keeping watch.
By continuing to watch for these defects, these patterns, and promptly asking for help from your higher power, maybe talking to a sponsor to address them, they become manageable. It prevents that slow slide back into the old ways. It really is a moment-by-moment vigilance maintained daily.
That awareness then feeds directly into what many find the most difficult actions of all, making amends. Step 8 focuses just on becoming willing to make amends to everyone harmed.
The willingness step.
This seems like where personal responsibility really takes center stage, maybe in a way it hasn't before.
The focus here is absolutely critical. It's personal responsibility. First, the list of people harmed has to be made, honestly, thoroughly. And the willingness to make amends must be genuine.
Right.
The process demands you prioritize taking responsibility for your own behavior, completely setting aside any perceived slights or poor treatment you might have received back from others.
So no justifying.
Absolutely no justifying. That self-pitying excuse, well, I wouldn't have done X if they hadn't done Y first.
Blah.
That has to be discarded completely. You're confronting your past with brutal honesty, recognizing that trying to purposefully forget past wrongs is actually a massive block to achieving any lasting peace.
Okay, so that's the willingness innate. Then step 9 requires the courage to actually follow through. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. This sounds like it takes guts and careful thought.
Tremendous courage, yes, and meticulous thought. The literature is extremely explicit on how to do a proper amends. It differentiates it very sharply from just a casual kind of ineffective apology.
What's an ineffective apology look like in this context?
Well, something like, look, I'm sorry you feel I was rude to you. You see the shift.
Yeah, it puts it back on them, their feelings.
Exactly. It's sometimes called a ua culpa. It subtly shifts the focus onto the wrong person's reaction rather than clearly admitting your own fault. That's not a real amend.
So what does a proper amend look like according to these principles?
It generally requires three key components: admission, action, and non-excuse.
Okay.
First, admission. You must admit exactly what you did wrong. Be specific. I stole money from you. I lied to you repeatedly. I was unreliable and let you down for years. Clear admission. Second, action. State the action you are taking now to make it right where possible. This might be paying back money, or it might be demonstrating consistently changed behavior over time. It's about restitution, not just words.
And third?
Third, non-excuse. You do this without offering any excuse or justification for the past conduct. No, I was drinking, or I was having a hard time. Just the admission and the commitment to make it right. And furthermore,
Yes.
the program strongly encourages letting the wronged party speak their piece without interrupting, listening with humility, really hearing them, and accepting the consequences, whatever they may be.
Wow, that's intense. What about that crucial caveat, though? Except when to do so would injure them or others. How do you navigate that kind of moral tightrope?
That clause is incredibly important. It's there to protect innocent third parties and to prevent causing brand new wreckage just to clear your own conscience.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The classic example is perhaps an old affair. Making a direct amend to the affair partner might require exposing the affair, which could then destroy the innocent spouse, maybe children. That would clearly cause more injury, tremendous injury.
So what do you do then?
In those cases, the guidance is usually to find an alternative way to live up to the principle of the amend without causing the direct harm. This might involve, say, making amends indirectly by helping others who are harmed in similar ways, or by finding a discreet way to resolve any tangible damage without creating new victims. It requires deep thought, prayer, and usually consultation with a sponsor or trusted advisor. Safety and avoiding new harm have to be prioritized.
That makes sense. The reward for all this immense effort, often painful, it must be equally profound, right?
It is. It's described in the literature as finding a new freedom and a new happiness.
Freedom and happiness.
Yeah. The fear of the past, the fear of people, it starts to diminish. Because you've faced it honestly, you've done everything reasonably in your power to set things right. That need to run to hide to avoid people or situations, it starts to dissipate.
And what does that allow?
It allows you to start cultivating relationships that are actually founded on real life, on truth, on genuine trust. This honesty paves the way for living with dignity, with usefulness.
Okay, so this successful individual recovery, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's sustained, it's protected by the customs, the structure of the community itself, which brings us to the traditions.
The principles for the group.
Anonymity and non-professionalism are called out as absolute cornerstones. Let's talk about anonymity first, Tradition 12.
Yes, Tradition 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities. It's explicitly named the spiritual foundation.
Why so foundational?
Well, the sources recount the early days, the hazards that were created when certain members became famous or well-known as members. They started using their recovery story, maybe unintentionally at first, for personal gain, for prestige. It distorted things.
So anonymity is like a direct countermeasure against the ego,
Yeah.
which is always lurking, ready to contaminate the message.
That's a great way to put it. Exactly. It protects the uniformity, the purity of the message itself. Remember, people struggling with addiction often have intense battles with ego, with pride, with that craving for the spotlight.
Right.
Anonymity ensures the focus stays squarely on the principles, the steps, the traditions, rather than relying on the charisma or the status or the story of any single individual. The personal story matters profoundly within the fellowship as shared experience, but the individual's name, especially when speaking publicly at the level of press, radio, films, it doesn't. Principles over personalities.
And Tradition 8, that commitment to remain forever non-professional seems deeply connected to that, protecting the whole spiritual exchange from money motives.
Absolutely connected. It's the ultimate expression of that core idea. Freely you have received, freely give.
Mm-hmm.
The core belief is stark. The moment money really enters the equation between the helper and the helped in the specific context, spirituality inevitably conflicts with professionalism. The motives get tangled
So the role of a sponsor is defined very carefully then.
with very strict limits.
Yes.
A sponsor is simply another sober person. They use their personal experience, that's key, experience, not professional training or scientific wisdom, to help the newcomer solve basically one problem. How do I stay sober today using these steps?
So a sponsor is definitely not a therapist, not a doctor, not a financial advisor.
Explicitly not. The literature is very clear. They are not a professional caseworker, not a trained counselor. They should never be dispensing financial, medical, or legal advice. Their expertise is solely experiential, and it's confined to guiding the newcomer through the 12 steps based on their own journey. This non-professionalism keeps the message accessible, free, and unburdened by credentials or cost.
The fellowship's approach to the outside world also reflects this kind of humility, doesn't it? Tradition 11 says public relations should be based on attraction rather than promotion.
Yeah, that's another profound concept. Attraction, not promotion.
What does that mean in practice?
It means instead of trying to advertise or market or, overtly sell the program like a product,
Right.
the focus is entirely on allowing friends, family, doctors, clergy, employers to recommend the program naturally because they appreciate the visible changes they see in the members they know.
So the member's job isn't to recruit.
No, the member's job is simply to focus on their own health, their own recovery, living the principles. That positive change will naturally influence their family system, their workplace, their wider world. When you genuinely achieve some serenity and live differently, people notice. They become attracted to the cause of that transformation. They ask questions.
And this commitment to the group, it also extends inward, requiring unity. That's tradition 1, right? Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon unity.
Unity is paramount for the survival of the individual and the group. The practical extension of this, day-to-day in the fellowship, is the absolute necessity of practicing live and let live.
Live and let live.
Yeah, because the fellowship is made up entirely of flawed, imperfect, recovering human beings. Acceptance is essential. You have to accept that people, both inside and outside the fellowship, will inevitably say things or do things you disagree with, maybe even things that rub you the wrong way.
Okay.
If the group allowed anger, personal resentments, or that feeling of righteous indignation to dominate the atmosphere,
Right.
unity would be shattered instantly. The whole structure could easily disintegrate back into chaos. So the program basically requires the individual to forego the sometimes satisfying luxury of judgment for the sake of collective survival and individual serenity.
Wow. Okay, so when all these pieces come together, the radical acceptance, the spiritual connection, however understood, that rigorous daily inventory, the courage of making amends, and then the unity and protection provided by the traditions. What's the ultimate result? What does this transformed life actually look like, according to the sources?
Well, fundamentally, it's described as a life rooted in replacement, positive replacement.
Replacement.
Yeah, fear is steadily, day by day, replaced with faith.
Mm.
That paralyzing resentment starts to turn into liberating acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Corrosive anger begins to change into understanding, maybe even love.
Okay.
The individual gains back their dignity. They often rediscover a sense of humor they thought was lost forever. They can function as a responsible person, again, someone who is self-expressing, who is receptive to change without being constantly derailed by crippling anxiety.
And the goal becomes?
The final ambition, according to the sources, it isn't about achieving power or prestige or wealth. It's something quieter, deeper. It's the abiding desire to live usefully and to walk humbly under whatever grace or higher power they've come to understand.
That sounds like a degree of, well, inner reconstruction that goes way beyond just stopping a bad habit.
Oh, it often is. The source material even notes that many people live conventionally normal, seemingly well-adjusted lives without ever achieving the depth of spiritual and psychological reconstruction that recovering people often find absolutely necessary for survival.
Mm-hmm.
It involves deliberately developing a spiritual life, often starting from scratch, from that shaky step 2 foundation, and then culminating in the daily practice of that spiritual life. It requires continuous conscious effort.
So just to synthesize these themes then, we're seeing recovery as this architectural undertaking. It starts with acceptance, but reframed as empowerment, recognizing powerlessness actually illuminates the only path forward.
Right, the foundation.
Then the spiritual connection, however you define it, provides the necessary strength, the scaffolding maybe.
Mhm.
Then the rigorous action inventory, amends systematically, clears away the emotional wreckage of the past, clears the site.
Yeah, make space for the new structure.
And finally, the tradition's anonymity, non-professionalism, unity, they act like zoning laws or building codes, safeguarding the integrity and the unity of the whole framework.
That's a good analogy. And this restored life, this serenity, this new building, it's never a fully acquired possession. You don't just build it and walk away.
Yeah.
No, it's described as an ongoing daily miracle, a process, not a destination.
Which brings us back to that famous phrase, recovery is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition.
Exactly that. Contingent. It depends on ongoing action. That maintenance is sustained through continuous effort, things like prayer, meditation, seeking knowledge of that greater will, and then crucially, putting in the effort to carry that will out in your actions. It's a constant re-engagement with reality, with humility, with the principles.
That idea, that constant maintenance, brings us to a really profound observation that seems to underpin the whole psychological foundation of this work. It's about the connection between our internal world, our thoughts, and our external circumstances.
Yes, we've seen how a particular train of thought, if you persist in it, whether it's good or destructive, inevitably produces results. On your character, yes, but also on your circumstances.
It's a fundamental principle, isn't it? Almost a law of self-mastery, maybe.
It seems to be.
Yeah.
The reality is, you often can't directly choose your external circumstances. Life throws things at you. But you absolutely can choose and curate and manage your thoughts.
Okay.
And by doing that, by choosing your thoughts, you indirectly but surely begin to shape your circumstances over time. The transformation, therefore, it doesn't start by trying to manipulate the external situation first. It starts by governing the interior landscape of your own mind.
Which leaves us with this really powerful final question for you, the listener, today. If thought truly does precede action, and if our circumstances in the long run are often a reflection of our most encouraged, most pervasive thoughts, including those hidden resentments maybe, or those destructive daydreams we indulge in, what single destructive thought pattern, if you were to cease it, consciously replace it with acceptance or gratitude today, might begin the fundamental transformation of your circumstances tomorrow?
That's the question.
Consider that, and consider the daily, deliberate work required to truly start seeing the world and yourself through that new, clearer lens.